Hi, I'm Matt Tracy. I'm here to talk to you about utility revenue cases. How do utilities ask for money? I've already completed one segment. We're moving on. I hope you've watched that because I'm going to jump right in with where I left off. We were just talking about what is regulated. Now we're moving on to who regulates utilities. Almost everybody. There are, within the United States, there are both state and federal legislation that apply to utilities. Within each state, then, there are public utility commissions. In different places, that may be a corporation commission, that may be a public service commission, that may be a public utility commission. There's 50 states. There aren't 50 different names, but there's more than one or two. The commissions will oversee and set regulations for their utilities. They provide approvals for things that happen for the utility. And of course, they do rate cases, which we'll be getting into in more detail in a bit. More locally, there are local ordinances. Individual cities or counties may have rules about what a utility may do within their jurisdiction. Beyond that, just about everybody in the United States, you've got the Securities and Exchange Commission will be overseeing them. The IRS, like everybody else, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Energy. It gets hard to find a group that doesn't have some say in what a utility does. It just goes on and on. At one point, I used to laugh that NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, was the only one that really didn't have any say over what utilities did. And then one of my students in class pointed out, one of my fellow utility workers, that in fact they were required to provide certain weather information to the National Weather Service, and so which is overseen by NOAA. So yeah, pretty much everybody oversees utilities. All right, let's talk about a revenue rate case. A revenue rate case is the process through which a utility sets the rates it's allowed to charge its customers. All right, as I said before in the first video, utilities don't get to just charge whatever they want. They have to go before commission and explain, here's what we need, here's why we need this revenue, here's how much revenue we need, and then ultimately the commission says yes or no onto this is how many dollars you're allowed to collect. The revenue rate case is that process. Now there's another rate case, a rate design case. Oftentimes they are linked. Sometimes they'll be done together. Some states actually have them as two separate cases. So you will do one and then follow it up with another. It depends on this particular jurisdiction. Typically, rate design cases are less frequent, and that determines which customer classes should pay more or less compared to each other. So it could be that you have your revenue rate case, and you finish that up, and you do an across-the-board increase. Everybody gets whatever percent, let's call it 3% just to have a number out there. A 3% increase. Okay, we're done with that, we're good. If you follow up then with a rate design case, the revenue change to the utility will be neutral. That is, the utility will have the same number of dollars coming in on average per year at the end of the case that they did at the beginning of the case. But what happens is that the different classes, and by classes I mean like residential, small commercial, large commercial, big industrial, a lot of times you'll have street and area lighting, private area lighting, that sort of thing as a separate class. And each of those can be subdivided. But as far as the big classes, you've got residential, commercial, industrial, lighting. They may go up or down so that, okay, residential pays a little more, big industrials pay a little less, lighting pays, however it shifts. At the end of the process, the utility is getting the same amount of dollars, but each of the different classes is rates may have gone up or down. That's a rate design case. I'm not going to be covering that in this course. It takes quite a bit more information to get up to speed on how that works, and I'm not sure I'm prepared to do that for you, but I'm thinking about it. But for now, let's just do the basic case of how do we determine how much total revenue the utility needs in order to continue its operations. All right. In a rate case, you will have a number of participants. The first one, obviously, is going to be the commission and the commissioners. In most states, you've got 3 to 5 commissioners. They are either elected or appointed, typically by the governor with the advice and consent of the Senate or whatever. Again, 50 states, 50 different ways. Many of them are the same, similar, but it varies. You've got these commissioners. They act as judges and jury in deciding this thing. This ends up being a quasi-judicial proceeding, which means it's a lot like a rate case, like a court case you would see on television, only not as interesting. Frankly, most court cases are not as interesting as what you see on television, but that's another story. I trust you all figured that out. All right, you have the commissioners. They are the officials who ultimately have final say, yes or no, here's the level, or there's the level. All right, they're the ones who actually make the decision. You have the commission staff. These are typically professionals, a large group of professionals. You will have accountants, you will have economists, you will have engineers, and you will have specialists within certain areas within each of those large groups. They will review the company's request in great detail. All right. Obviously, you've got the company involved. Anytime there's a change in revenues, the company will be involved. Typically has a fairly large staff of its own, lots of accountants, economists, engineers, doing very much the same sorts of things the commission staff do. It's not a one-for-one lineup, but pretty much if the company has someone doing something, the commission will have someone assigned to that same area. Now at the commission staff, they will, they may cover several areas, but it's a very similar sort of staffing typically. Then you'll have a consumer's representative. These have widely different names. Could be the Office of Public Counsel, could be the Consumer's Counsel, and it just goes on and on. They're typically authorized by statute, which is to say the legislature has said these people will exist, and their particular role in this is to represent the interests of residential and typically small commercial customers. All right, they don't always. I'm not sure that they always represent both groups. They always represent residential. They typically also represent small commercial. They typically have a smaller staff, but a lot of times they will use information garnered by the commission staff and then make their own adjustments to it. Again, the point is that the residential customers have a particular representative and the small commercials have a particular representative in this process. There will be certain customers who will intervene on their own behalf. Typically, these are the largest customers within a utility, and typically they will band together all of the big industrial customers and they will hire an attorney and a consultant or 2 or 3, and they will have some fairly specific interests. A lot of stuff they don't care about at all, and all the rest of you can fight it out, and we don't care. But there are some fairly significant issues that they face that they want to make sure that they are bringing to bear the very best information they can find, and typically they will be bringing some very competent expert advice into the situation. Then you will also have environmental interests, whether it's private or sometimes government agencies will intervene in order to look over what's going on environmentally. And then you'll have others who intervene. They feel they have their own interests that need represented, that are not properly represented by anybody else. Local governments, municipalities, counties can intervene. Typically, the point of an intervention and whether it is allowed or not will be based on whether anyone else is representing those interests in the case, and whether the interest you are proposing to have represented make any difference to the case. Are they germane to the case? And if they, if the commissioners decide this isn't germane, then you're out, whether or not it's any of your business. Pretty much individual residential customers, individual small commercial customers, people like that are not going to be allowed to intervene, largely because their interests are already represented by, specifically by statute, by the Consumer Council. Staff will always argue that they also represent individual residential interests. And in fact, I, as a company witness, regularly maintain that, yes, I too am representing residential and all my customers' interests. I'm not out to get anybody. I just, at the end of the day, I've got to have some level of revenue to run the company, and so that's an interest of mine. Anyway, if you don't have a separate interest different from everybody else that can be clearly recognized, you probably won't be granted intervention. So those are the participants in a case. All right, I've run here to about where my limit is. I'm going to stop, and we'll come back in on the next one. Thanks for joining me.